is 3D Studio Level 4 Clay. Alright, I am on the top shelf of the 3D Studio, and this is where your clay tools go and where you'll find everything that you need. Alright? Okay, so first things first, and remember, take out your sketchbook and label it Clay Experiments. Yep, you're going to be labeling it and showing it in here, okay? Alright, so this one, there is no excuse for not coming up with 10 creative things. I mean, you can do everything there's tons and tons of tools here that you can show me how they work. You can compare two clay types. We have the creative paper clay, and then if you see anything in this bucket, this air dry clay, this is going to be the model air drying clay. So you could compare these two clays to see how they're different. There's armature. What does armature do? How does this help the clay? You can show how that works. Can it stick? If you have to stick it to paper, what do you have to do to make clay stick to paper? Does anything work to make it to stick? If so, how does it stick? Does marker or paint or colored pencil work on these different types of clays? Is there any differences between them? Can you stick anything in and have it stay? How do you stick two pieces together? So I mean, there's just so many things that you can come up with clay, which is cool. I wanted to show you some of the things that were made last year with clay. We worked on making these super cool, they were foundations, or they're pots. If you want to make a pot, you can do that too. These are pretty simple to make. Learning scoring and rolling. One person didn't quite finish this, but this is actually a person that they started to make and work on. So, I mean, there's just so many things that you can do, all right? So, as we're learning, one of the first things that I'm going to tell you to do is get a paper bag, okay? And if someone else's name on it, just put a piece of tape on it and label something else. Put your name on it, and check to make sure there's no holes in the bag, because if there's a hole, it should be thrown away, because that will dry out your clay. The biggest thing is keeping it moist so that you can work with it until you're ready to be done with it. You also may need some saran wrap. This will keep it extra protected. So if you wrap it with saran wrap and put it in the bag, then it's a surefire way to make sure that it stays that way. Okay? So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to open up paper clay, creative paper clay, and I'm going to take this wire cutters, which is super cool, off a probably a really small little bit of clay, because I want to make sure clay is very expensive, and I want to make sure that we have enough. So I basically just pushed it down until I broke most of it off. And I don't want you guys using more than about this much for your experiments, okay? This is definitely the max, okay? Because everybody that does this is going to have to experiment a little bit and save some of it, okay? All right, so now that you have your clay, all right, you're going to do different things. So you just learned that the wire cutter cuts it. Let's see, one of the first things that you want to do, let's say you want to learn how to flatten it, okay? So I'm going to take off a little chunk right here. All right, and one of the key things that you can use is the rolling pin. Now, the rolling pin is meant to flatten and even out your clay, all right? So it works when you have a lot of clay, probably it's best for it, but can work for anything. I also have cups up there if for some reason multiple people are using it. The cups work pretty good, but rolling pins are obviously much better, okay? And so you're gonna have to figure out, how do I flatten this? And I wanna get the best, and this table is fine if you want to work flat on the table. I want to get this as even as I possibly can, okay? So that's a work of art that you're going to have to do to figure that out. All right, so let's say I want to cut this into a perfect circle, all right? So some of the tools that I could use, this is a needle tool, okay? This will help me cut it exactly the way that I want it, okay? Now, this is one way of doing it. Is there another way? There definitely could be, all right? So you're going to have to discover, what do I do if I want to make this? Now, when I'm using this one, I'm learning that it's making the edges kind of rough, right? So I really don't like that, and my circle ended up being a little weird here. So I don't really like how rough those edges are. I wonder if there's a way that I can smooth it, okay? So one of the cool things that you can use is this knife. This is a fettling knife, okay? Fettling knife is cool because you can use it to kind of smooth edges, cut things away if you need them to. It's definitely one way. I also have a cut here, so how do I bring that together? One of the ways that you can make sure that you bring things together is you can score it. So scoring is another process. Now, scoring is going to involve some water, so you're going to want to get some water, so I'm going to come back to that, okay? But first I just want to make it known that the fettling knife or a scraping tool is a good way to get rid of these edges. This is a scraping, smoothing tool, okay? Another good thing to have is a water spray bottle. If things start drying out, you can lightly spray it to keep it moist, or you can take, if you have some water with you, you can use a little bit on your fingers to keep it that way. One of the things that you need when you are scoring is you need slip, okay? So slip is actually made by taking a little bit of clay and putting it in the water, okay, and breaking it up. All right, it takes a little bit of time to decompose. Last year I had a whole bucket that was dedicated just to slip, so you could come and get some slip that was pre-made. What this does is it allows the clay to stick and have clay within the water so that it sticks more easily. Sometimes too much water can make it slip right off and not stick together. This slip is designed to make sure that it actually sticks, okay? So my goal is to try to make this stick together, right? Because I made this error. And this is where a fettling knife is really helpful. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to score this area with the sharp edge of this knife. And I want to make sure that it's not too deep, but that it's deep enough to really make a difference. And I want to do it on both sides. And this is where it's kind of like, ooh, it's really thin. I don't want to break it off, so you got to be really careful. It takes a lot of careful practice. Can you guys see what I'm doing here? Yeah. So this is called scoring. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of slip, just a tiny bit, and put it on the edge. And I'm going to bring this together, okay? All right. So what you'll want to do now is kind of smooth it over. And so, again, experiment with the different tools that you can use to smooth. It's difficult when it's this thin, right? Because you want to be really gentle, because otherwise you could make this whole surface so much thinner than the rest of it. But my goal is to try to cover this crack, right, and smooth it out. You might even need to add a little bit more clay and try to smooth it over, right? How would that work, okay? So I'm just doing my best here. I might take a tiny bit of this wet clay, actually right here, and put it on top of it. See how I did that? Now, it's not scored, so it may or may not stay. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it's wet enough to stay. But balancing how much water you use is going to be really important too, so that you do not have it melt apart. So I just learned one thing is that use scoring and slip to, sorry, you guys can't see this. Use scoring and slip to bring pieces together. You can also use extra small bits of clay and scraping tools to smooth cracked edges. Okay, that's another good thing that I learned right there, all right? So as you can see, this blended in pretty nicely here, okay? Now my next idea is, how can I get this example to stick in here? That's going to be kind of tough because I want to show that I did this, okay? So I'm going to experiment, and I actually haven't used a lot of this. I'm going to experiment with some rubber cement, and I'm going to see if rubber cement can stick to clay. So I took some rubber cement. Then now this clay is wet, I realize that, but I'm going to put some on the back of the clay, and I'm just going to let this dry and put this on the drying rack and see if it sticks next time, and that'll be another one of my discoveries, all right? Also, I know this clay is still wet, but one of the other things I can do is I can try different media with it. So it's a little bit later, and as you can see, the clay seems to be sticking to the paper. It's kind of peeling off, but I have a feeling that it will stick, and I would probably want to check it a day or two later. So that's good news. Something else that I could write on here. Now, one of the things I noticed, it started to dry, is I'm going to scrape a little bit off. And remember, if you come back to this, after a couple days, this will be very dry. And so you may not be able to do quite as much with it, or you can experiment and see what can you do with dry clay. I also have this scraper tool, or you could take the needle, and I'm going to experiment with the kind of things that I can do with clay. So I know I can kind of, okay, so I can do lines in it pretty easily here. Cool, yeah, all right. I could probably turn this into a magnet. I wonder how easy that would be. And sell it. 21 Pilots magnets and selling it. I love that. Now, as you notice, it's a little rough right here, okay? So how do I fix that? And it might be as simple as dipping this into the water, into the slip water, right? By the way, I have some much more mixed up slip water here. Okay, dipping it into the slip water. Maybe you want to use a little, yeah, tiny bit of water to moisten this and get these rough edges off, okay? All right, so the other ideas that I have are, I got some paints and I got some watercolor, and so I'm just gonna try and see what happens with these. I also have some marker, okay? And so this is another way that you can check. Now I know that this is a little wet, but I'm gonna try and see what marker does. And I'm gonna start with some watercolor, okay? I'm gonna get a little bit of watercolor on there. Now I know water tends to make the clay a little more mushy, so I'm gonna see how this affects it, and I just watered that part down, but it looks like it's taking the color pretty well. So that's pretty good. It doesn't really get in the grooves there unless I can get down in there. I wonder if I could get paint down in the grooves if I use some black. So, oh, I did it again. So now I'm gonna wet it down, and I'm gonna get a little bit of black and see what happens if I put black in the grooves. It kind of takes it. It's a little watery too, but cool. Hey, not bad, right? Okay, all right, that's kind of cool. All right, so it does seem to take watercolor. It'll be interesting to see what happens when it dries. And I'm gonna compare it to acrylic. Looks, now it's a different yellow too, and it looks like this yellow has kind of dried into the clay. I don't know if this yellow I think is probably gonna have more of a layered look on it because this yellow has plastic in it. Acrylic by nature has plastic in it. So that's another thing to keep in mind, okay? So, and then let's see what happens when we put the black in there. Making sure to wash this out. It's nice and clean so I don't get black, yellow in the black, right? We don't want that. So, well, that is definitely much heavier. So I guess it depends on how bold you want it to be. This is definitely much bolder than the watercolor. Watercolor is a bit more of a natural blended look, and this is a much bolder look. So it looks like it's got both that we can do with it. So, and oh, it definitely picks up the texture here as I'm doing that. And what happens if I rinse it and then I use the water just to go over it here? It comes off pretty easily. Okay, cool. Oh, it blends it. Very cool. So it can blend it too, okay? It can blend on clay and still work. Very interesting, okay? So again, I can write all of those things down and put them down for clay. I already gave you a list of all the possible things you can do with it. So enjoy, and make sure you show me your experiments on here. Try to make them thin. Remember, you'll be making a project when you actually make a project, but show me what you experimented with and what you discovered on here. All right, thank you.